I want to welcome our audience to this L.E.A.R.N podcast. It is in these podcasts that L.E.A.R.N wants you to meet experts that can help you in your work as school leaders or perhaps partners in the education landscape. The topic for this podcast is learning environments, and our guest is Mark Hubbard, CEO of Paragon Furniture. On the L.E.A.R.N website, you will find on the research page under the COE Sustainability and the element of learning environments, research in the area being discussed along with potential resources to access. Mark, I want to welcome you to the L.E.A.R.N podcast. It's good to have you here to speak with us about this really important topic. And I know you have an extensive research and work background in the area of learning environments, even currently serving as the chairman of the board of directors for Ed Market Association that keeps you very deeply involved in this work. But would you please share with the audience some more of your background and experience in learning environments, and especially in the space of furniture?
Sure. Thanks for having me, David. Our approach to research has been very hands-on. It's been very practical. The most informative aspect of our product development and design is when we go out in the field and actually talk to teachers and practitioners about what works and what doesn't work in the learning environment. So all of our research is really based on hands-on application. It's all very experiential. And I think it's done a lot to advance our company. I think our best product ideas have actually come from talking to teachers and administrators directly.
Wonderful. Now, you've been doing this quite a bit for quite a many years, right?
Yeah.
And in a lot of districts. Give us a sense of how many years you've been doing this work and how many districts roughly you've been involved with.
Well, this is we're in our 19th year now since I bought the company. The business is almost 40 years old. We're the third ownership team. We've owned it longer than anybody previously. In terms of the number of districts we're involved with, I would say it's in the thousands. Most of our district relationships are really prosperous. We tend to work on multiple projects within districts over multiple years of time. So we have lots of repeat customers, lots of enduring relationships. So I'd put it at about 1,000 unique districts, though, around the country.
That's quite a bit of experience. And obviously, the way you do your action research brings in a great deal of expertise. I'm curious about that research and stuff you've leaned into. Now, I know in the amount of time we have dedicated to this podcast, we can't possibly cover all the research around learning environments and the effect of furniture on engagement. But if you would you share with our audience kind of those key insights or pieces of information about the research out there around learning environments and furniture?
Sure. So one of the ways that we conduct research is that we provide what we call pilot classrooms, where we will donate a collection of furniture to a school site. And what we've asked for in return is just feedback, honest feedback. We're not asking for any money to exchange hands here. It's just simply, we're going to give you some tools and resources to use inside your learning environment. And we'd like to know how it worked, how we performed. Examples of that would be, we might go into a core classroom, your sort of basic classroom, remove all the traditional desks and chairs and replace those items with a variety of tables, chairs, desks, some standing height, some sitting height. Sometimes we'll put soft seating in that same traditional learning environment. We'll give the teacher a couple of different learning stations or teaching stations to work from. And then we'll ask each student and the teacher to provide unique input or feedback, rather, on how that furniture affected or shaped their behavior, shaped or affected their sense of agency. It's been a really interesting, the feedback we get is really interesting, and it's voluminous. You maybe wouldn't be surprised that when you ask for feedback from teachers and students, they are more than happy to accommodate. And again, it's from those experiences. We've done those many multiples of times, David, over the almost 20 years of doing this kind of work. We've really gotten some of our best ideas. And by the way, some of the best ideas are not to move forward with a product that we thought was fantastic. It's not always the feedback is, yes, keep doing more of this. It's sometimes, no, this doesn't work for us. So it works both ways, and both are really valuable to our company.
So it'd be fair to say in the research you've done that it really is unique to the space and the place in terms of the nature of the furniture and its impact on the learning environment. It's not necessarily broadly brushed across all districts. Would that be fair?
Very fair to say. And I'd say also it has to do with the population age. That's what's appropriate for and what works well for maybe fourth and fifth graders doesn't necessarily work very well for 11th and 12th graders. So I think it's also very specific to age, not just geographic area. It has a lot to do with the age of the users themselves.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And so, as I'm kind of hearing you in your experience, probably the most important learning has to do around how you engage with districts around what they're trying to accomplish, and specifically how that furniture may impact the learning environment, and you found some success in that process.
Yeah, and what may not be surprising to you, David, because you've been in the administration business for a long time, is that districts really have very different goals for what they want to accomplish in their school sites, and actually even classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher. Sometimes they have very different objectives or very different outcomes and ways that they want to see the kids interact with each other or interact with content. So it's really very interesting how kind of bespoke this can become. It's hard to scale one vision across the entire district, much less in one campus. And so being sensitive, having furniture, a collection of furniture that is versatile is really important, because gosh, the outcomes, what we're driving towards sometimes are so different and nuanced based on the district's goals, the school site's goals, and again, the teacher specific goals for his or her classroom.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. Now, in your experience, if districts wanted to engage in really deep diving into the impact of furniture and on the student learning environment, engagement, the teacher experience, whatever it may be, what are some predictable positive outcomes that they would want to make certain that they internally and externally communicated to their communities, right? And just in terms of, if we go down this path, here's some obvious positive things that are going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that we have to make the district and the school participants know that we're not looking just for affirmation here that the ideas are good. When we say, here's a pilot classroom, a predictable positive outcome is that there are no wrong answers. This is a safe experiment here. No one's going to get hurt. If whatever we provide to the school for that pilot classroom doesn't work, it's okay. No one's going to be punished. It doesn't mean that there's any negative outcomes at all. So I think one of the predictive positive outcomes is that we're okay with failure here. We're embracing this experiment with the idea that it may not go the way that Paragon had hoped it would go. And that is perfectly okay. In fact, that's really what learning, isn't it all about?
Right.
Is taking risks and failing and learning from those failures and coming back from those failures. That's our approach and our message to our school district participants is, hey, we're learners too. We want to be a part of getting better. And if we fail at this, don't throw us out. Don't give up hope. We're going to come back at it again with your input. We're going to try again. I think that's a really positive, predictable outcome, is that this is about getting better. It's not just about patting us on the back and affirming what we think we already know. And I think that's what learning should be about anyway.
Right. You're kind of describing a very strategic approach, and the predictable outcome is you will get, based on what you put into it, an outcome that is positive for your students.
That's exactly right.
Now, that's a little bit different approach than often we get, right? We often we're going to go through a purchasing process and we just go buy a bunch of stuff. But if we're going to go through this strategic process of actually looking at the impact of learning from furniture, if you will, on the learning environment, then based on your experience, what are some of the implementation barriers that districts would want to prepare for?
Well, I think the biggest barrier, David, is probably just getting enough buy-in, enough consensus. There's sometimes competing or conflicting interests, as you know, within any organization, and schools are certainly not immune from that. So that's the biggest barrier, is just having enough clarity around why we're doing this, why this research makes sense for our district, and getting buy-in and getting adoption of these pilot programs is sometimes a barrier if the message isn't very clearly laid out by the administrator, whether that's the principal or the superintendent. I think as long as you can craft a reason why we're doing this and that this is what we're hoping to get out of it and set expectations properly, then these things go well. But when they don't go well, it's usually because the message isn't very clear. It hasn't been very well articulated to those that we're asking to participate. So that's the biggest barrier, I think, is just resolving sort of the conflicts of interest of why we're doing this and how does this improve my life. That sounds pretty obvious and easy, but it's not. As you know, having sat in that district leadership position for many, many years, it's hard to articulate why this is important and why you should be a participant, a willing participant in this process.
Yeah, and I remember serving as a superintendent and going through some of this. One of the barriers I always experienced was, but this furniture is what we can easily rotate. Instead of looking at the furniture as a piece of the learning environment, it's what we can rotate easily. In other words, we can have backups of this very easy and rotate it in. I don't
Yeah,
know if you've experienced that as well, just overcoming that kind of mindset.
absolutely. You and I've talked a little bit about this before in the past that, a chief academic officer may have different sort of priorities for what a learning experience and environment should look like. The person that runs maintenance and operations might have a different set of priorities. The person making purchasing decisions has different priorities. Those are sometimes hard to resolve. Getting everybody to agree that these are the one or two or three critical business or critical objectives that we have to go accomplish. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge. Once we get consensus and once we get alignment, these model classroom research projects tend to go really, really well. But that's the hardest part, is making that vision clear, agreeing that we're going to go test for these certain objectives or priorities, and then moving forward. That's the hardest part, is just getting to that point where we can say, all right, let's go implement.
Right. And I know you've seen that because you've worked with thousands of districts. So you've seen it where districts do a really good job. If you were to share a story, what would be a story you would share with the audience about how going through this process has impacted a school or a school district?
So I would say that the one story comes to mind. And before I tell you the story, what impressed me about the leader of this particular school campus is her vulnerability. She was willing as a leader to be wrong. She was willing as a leader to say, we're trying this and it could be not successful at all. That to me was a real characteristic or a feature of her leadership, is her willingness to be vulnerable and be wrong. What she wanted to do was implement a makerspace for the first time in her school campus. No one even knew what a makerspace was. This was about 7 or 8 years ago, before makerspaces became some common parlance. We delivered one of our first makerspace classrooms to this district. And about 6 months after the fact, I called the principal and said, I'd love to come see the space. We're new to the space. I'd like to see how it works. How do you operate in these spaces? How do the kids engage with the furniture that we've provided? And she said, great, come meet me at the school, but don't come inside. Meet me in the parking lot. And I thought that didn't seem like a very good start to this adventure that I was about to be on. And she said, when I got there, the reason I asked you to meet me outside is I don't want you to refer to the area that you're calling a makerspace as our makerspace. And I thought, again, this is not a good sign if she doesn't even want to call it a makerspace, and that's what we sold her. She said that the reason for that is because that space had sort of saturated what was going on in that makerspace, had poured out into the entire school community, and that they called the entire school now a makerspace. That it wasn't, being a makerspace wasn't relegated to a 20 by 20 classroom anymore. The entire campus now was a makerspace, and that's why she wanted me to not refer to that 20 by 20 classroom where my furniture was sitting as the makerspace. Right. She said that space had really changed the culture of the entire campus, and every place now on that campus was a makerspace.
Wow,
and I
that's
thought
a powerful message.
Inspiring. Yeah, I thought it was truly inspiring. And I think it started from her willingness to say, let's try something that we've never tried before. And she said, and it may not work, guys, to her staff and to her students and to her parents, this makerspace is not something we've done before. We may not know how to make it successful, but I'm asking you to take a risk with me. And it turned not only into a success for that 120 by 20 space, but the entire campus culturally made a shift.
Wow, that is an amazing story, and we'd love to see that become more common, right?
Absolutely. That to me is probably one of the more successful installments that we've ever had in 19 years now of doing this. That's one of my favorite stories because it shows the power that space can have. I always say space is never neutral. It's either working for you or against you. You have to choose. You have a choice. And when we see spaces where the environment is actually priming the learner and helping students and teachers engage in a more meaningful way, being more excited about learning, gosh, there's just probably no bigger payoff.
Wow, that is really, really well said. Now, obviously, that's a campus you would like to highlight, but if there was a district that was really interested in this work and going down this pathway, is there a district you would highlight as a place they might want to visit, and why would you do that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple here in Texas, in North Texas, where we're based, that I'd recommend. Well, there's one in North Texas and there's one in West Texas. The one in West Texas that I'm thinking about is called Isleta ISD. It's near El Paso. They're a district that has really engaged, or rather embraced, this idea of risk taking. They have a very large campus, a big student population, lots of old buildings that they've been reinvested in. Not only just the building restructuring, remodeling all the buildings, but they've refurnished most of their buildings. The reason I point them out is that they are very aggressive in terms of taking risks, not crazy risks, not risks that haven't been thought through carefully, but they're not afraid. They don't let fear dictate. That's not their economy. They don't work in a fear-based economy. They work in a hope-based economy where they're willing to give kids some latitude to try things and teachers the room to navigate and try things. So that's a district that I admire greatly for their risk-taking. One here in North Texas is a district called Northwest ISD. It's a very fast-growing district in the northwest part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. What I admire about them is that they're growing so rapidly. They can't build fast enough to keep up with their community, and yet they're still taking risks. They're not being conservative and drawing in. They're actually trying more experiential environments, and it seems to really be engaging and helping grow that community.
So if a district wanted to come and see this testing ground concept that you're talking about, both those districts would be places where they could see that at play and understand how it might be adapted in their districts.
Very much so.
Okay. So if a district or a partner were interested in exploring more deeply into this work, how would they go about contacting you and arranging for deeper conversations?
The easiest way to contact me is to go through our website, and there's several different places there that you can contact and reach out, including directly to me. I love this business. I love being a part of this industry. I'm very excited about our impact that we have on lives. And so I'm deeply involved personally in this business and in what we're doing. So I encourage people to reach out to me directly if they have an interest in piloting a classroom and conducting a research project on their campus, a local research project. We would be very happy to consider that. So reach out to me directly. You can do that right from our website.
Okay. And is your direct reach, could you tell the audience what that is?
Sure. It's my first name, Mark, M-A-R-K, at Paragon, Paragoninc.com, Mark at ParagonInc.com. There's also several other links, if you can't remember that, on our website, general requests for information links that you can send a message to, and it will get to me.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, for being a part of this important work of supporting our students in schools. And thank you for your participation in a L.E.A.R.N. podcast.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, David.